The sun was shining brightly on a Saturday afternoon, and the local grocery store was bustling with activity. Shoppers moved through the aisles, filling their carts with groceries for the week. Among them was a teenage boy, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, quietly browsing the snack section. He was just like any other kid his age, curious, a little bored, and looking for something to munch on. Little did he know, this ordinary day was about to take a dramatic turn. The boy had been in the store for about 10 minutes when he noticed a store employee glancing at him from the corner of his eye. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe the employee was just doing his job, keeping an eye on the aisles. But the glances became more frequent, and soon, the boy felt a knot forming in his stomach. He tried to ignore it, telling himself he was just overthinking. After all, he hadn't done anything wrong. As he walked toward the checkout counter with a bag of chips and a soda, the store manager, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, stepped in front of him. "Excuse me, young man," the manager said, his voice firm but not loud enough to draw attention from other shoppers. "Can you come with me, please?" The boy froze. His heart started racing, and his palms felt sweaty. "Why? What did I do?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. The manager crossed his arms. "We've had some issues with theft lately, and I need to check your bag." The boy's eyes widened. "I didn't steal anything," he said, his voice rising a little. "I was just buying these." He held up the chips and soda, his hands shaking. The manager didn't budge. "I'm not accusing you of anything," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But we have to be careful. Come with me to the office, and we'll sort this out." By now, a few shoppers nearby had stopped to watch the scene unfold. The boy felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He wanted to argue, to explain that he hadn't done anything wrong, but the manager's stern look made him feel small. Reluctantly, he followed the man to a small office at the back of the store. Inside the office, the manager asked the boy to empty his pockets and hand over his bag. The boy complied, his hands trembling as he placed his belongings on the table. The manager went through everything meticulously, checking every pocket and crevice. The boy stood there, feeling humiliated and angry. He kept thinking about how unfair this was. He hadn't stolen anything, yet here he was, being treated like a criminal. After what felt like an eternity, the manager finished his search. He didn't find anything suspicious, but instead of apologizing, he simply said, "You're free to go." The boy didn't know what to say. He felt a mix of relief and anger. He wanted to demand an apology, to tell the manager how wrong it was to accuse him without proof, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he grabbed his things and walked out of the office, his head down. As he left the store, the boy couldn't shake the feeling of injustice. He thought about calling his mom but decided against it. He didn't want to worry her. But as he walked home, the incident kept replaying in his mind. Why had the manager singled him out? Was it because of the way he looked? The thought made his stomach churn. When he got home, his mom was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. The boy hesitated for a moment before telling her everything. As he spoke, his mom's expression changed from concern to anger. She listened quietly, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. When he finished, she took a deep breath and said, "We're going back to the store." The boy's eyes widened. "What? Why?" "Because this isn't right," his mom said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong, and they had no right to treat you like that. We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again." The boy wanted to argue, to tell her it wasn't worth it, but he could see the determination in her eyes. He knew there was no changing her mind. Reluctantly, he followed her out the door and back to the store. When they arrived, the store was still busy. The boy's mom walked straight to the customer service desk, her head held high. The boy trailed behind her, feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. He didn't know what to expect, but he trusted his mom. The store manager was at the desk, talking to an employee. When he saw the boy and his mom approaching, his expression changed. He looked surprised, maybe even a little nervous. The boy's mom didn't waste any time. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice calm but firm. The manager hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course. How can I help you?" The boy's mom took a deep breath. "You accused my son of stealing today. You took him to your office, searched his belongings, and humiliated him in front of everyone. And you didn't even apologize when you found nothing." The manager shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we have to be careful. We've had issues with theft, and—" "That doesn't give you the right to treat my son like a criminal," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "He's a good kid. He didn't do anything wrong, and you had no proof. Do you know how that feels? To be accused of something you didn't do?" The manager didn't respond. He looked down, clearly uncomfortable. The boy's mom continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I want an apology. Not just for my son, but for every kid who's been treated unfairly because of how they look. This isn't right, and it needs to stop." The manager nodded slowly. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. It won't happen again." The boy's mom looked at him for a moment before nodding. "Thank you," she said. Then she turned to her son and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go." As they walked out of the store, the boy felt a sense of relief. He looked up at his mom and smiled. "Thanks, Mom." She smiled back, her eyes filled with pride. "Always stand up for what's right," she said. "No matter what." The boy nodded, feeling a newfound sense of confidence. He knew the world wasn't always fair, but with his mom by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came his way. The car ride home was quiet, but the air between the boy and his mom was filled with unspoken emotions. The boy stared out the window, replaying the events in his mind. He felt a mix of pride and lingering frustration. His mom had stood up for him in a way he hadn't expected, but the sting of being unfairly accused still lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about him, it was about something bigger. His mom glanced at him from the driver's seat, sensing his unease. "You okay?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. The boy nodded, though his voice was hesitant. "Yeah, I guess. I don't get why he thought I'd steal something. I wasn't even acting suspicious or anything." His mom sighed, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Sometimes, people make assumptions based on things that have nothing to do with who you are. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it happens. What matters is how you handle it, and how you make sure it doesn't define you." The boy thought about her words. He knew she was right, but it still felt heavy. "Do you think he'll actually change? Or was he just saying that to get us to leave?" His mom paused, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know. People can change, but it takes more than one conversation. What's important is that we stood up for what's right. If he doesn't change, that's on him. But we did our part." The boy nodded, feeling a little lighter. He admired his mom's strength and the way she always seemed to know what to say. Still, he couldn't help but wonder if this would happen again, not just to him, but to someone else. When they got home, the boy's younger sister was sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework. She looked up as they walked in, her eyes curious. "Where'd you guys go?" she asked. The boy hesitated, unsure of how much to share. But his mom stepped in, her tone calm and reassuring. "We had to take care of something at the store. Nothing to worry about." His sister shrugged and went back to her homework, but the boy could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. He made a mental note to talk to her later, to explain what had happened in a way that wouldn't scare her. He didn't want her to feel the same weight he was carrying. Later that evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the boy's mom brought up the incident again. "I think it's important we talk about what happened today," she said, looking at both her children. "Sometimes, people will judge you based on things you can't control. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's something we have to be prepared for." The boy's sister looked up, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" The boy's mom took a deep breath. "Today, at the store, someone accused your brother of stealing just because of the way he looked. They didn't have any proof, but they assumed he was doing something wrong. It's called profiling, and it happens more often than it should." The boy's sister frowned. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," her mom agreed. "But what's important is how we respond. We stood up for what's right, and we made sure they knew their actions weren't okay. It's not easy, but it's necessary." The boy listened quietly, feeling a mix of emotions. He was grateful for his mom's support, but he also felt a growing sense of responsibility. He didn't want his sister to ever feel the way he had felt today, humiliated, powerless, and unfairly judged. After dinner, the boy went to his room and sat on his bed, staring at the wall. He thought about the manager's face when his mom confronted him. He thought about the shoppers who had stopped to watch, some looking sympathetic, others indifferent. He thought about how quickly things had escalated and how differently it could have ended if his mom hadn't been there. As he lay down to sleep that night, the boy made a promise to himself. He wouldn't let this experience define him, but he also wouldn't forget it. He would use it as a reminder to always stand up for what's right, just like his mom had done. And maybe, just maybe, he could help make sure no one else had to go through what he did. The next morning, the boy woke up feeling a little stronger, a little more determined. He knew the world wasn't perfect, but he also knew he had the power to make a difference, one small step at a time. And with his mom by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next few days passed quietly, but the boy couldn't shake the memory of what had happened at the store. It lingered in the back of his mind, like a shadow he couldn't quite escape. He tried to focus on school and his usual routines, but every time he walked past a store or saw a security camera, he felt a small pang of unease. He wondered if the manager had really meant his apology or if it was just empty words to avoid trouble. One afternoon, as the boy walked home from school, he noticed a flyer taped to a lamppost. It was advertising a community meeting about fairness and equality in local businesses. The words caught his attention immediately. He stood there for a moment, reading the details. The meeting was happening that weekend, and it was open to everyone. The boy felt a spark of curiosity. Maybe this was a chance to do something more, to turn his frustration into action. When he got home, he showed the flyer to his mom. "Do you think we should go?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. His mom studied the flyer, her expression thoughtful. "I think it's a great idea," she said finally. "It's important to be part of these conversations. Plus, it might help you feel like you're making a difference." The boy nodded, feeling a sense of purpose for the first time since the incident. He didn't know what to expect from the meeting, but he was eager to find out. That Saturday, the boy and his mom arrived at the community center where the meeting was being held. The room was already filling up with people of all ages and backgrounds. Some were holding signs, others were chatting in small groups, and a few were setting up chairs at the front of the room. The boy felt a little out of place at first, but his mom gave him an encouraging smile, and he took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was there. The meeting began with a few speakers sharing their experiences of unfair treatment in local businesses. The boy listened intently, his heart sinking as he realized how common these stories were. One woman talked about being followed around a store by security, even though she was just shopping. Another man shared how his son had been accused of stealing simply because of the way he dressed. Each story felt familiar, and the boy couldn't help but think about his own experience. When the floor was open for comments, the boy's mom raised her hand. She stood up and shared what had happened at the store, her voice steady but filled with emotion. The boy felt a mix of pride and nervousness as she spoke, but he also felt a sense of relief. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. After the meeting, several people came up to the boy and his mom to thank them for sharing their story. One woman even handed the boy a small card with her phone number. "If you ever need to talk, or if you want to get more involved, let me know," she said with a warm smile. The boy nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. And if they did, he wanted to be part of that change. The days following the community meeting were a whirlwind of emotions for the boy. He felt energized by the stories he'd heard and the connections he'd made, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. He wanted to do something, to turn his frustration into action, but he wasn't sure where to start. His mom noticed his restlessness and sat him down one evening after dinner. "You've been thinking a lot about the meeting, haven't you?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing. The boy nodded, fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve. "Yeah. I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. But I don't know what I can do about it." His mom smiled, her eyes filled with pride. "You're already doing something just by caring. But if you want to take it further, there are ways. You could write about your experience, or talk to the store manager again, or even organize something in the community. It's up to you." The boy thought about her words. Writing felt too personal, and the idea of confronting the store manager again made him nervous. But organizing something, that felt like a challenge he could take on. "What if I tried to do something at school?" he asked hesitantly. "Like, maybe start a group or something?" His mom's smile widened. "That's a great idea. You could talk to your teachers or the principal and see if they'd support it. And if you need help, I'm here." The boy felt a surge of determination. For the first time since the incident, he felt like he had a clear path forward. The next day at school, he approached his favorite teacher, Ms. Carter, during lunch break. She was known for being approachable and supportive, and he hoped she'd be willing to help. "Ms. Carter, can I talk to you about something?" he asked, his voice a little shaky. She looked up from her desk and smiled. "Of course. What's on your mind?" The boy took a deep breath and explained everything: the incident at the store, the community meeting, and his idea to start a group at school to talk about fairness and equality. Ms. Carter listened intently, her expression growing more serious as he spoke. "That's a really important idea," she said when he finished. "I think it's something a lot of students could benefit from. Let me talk to the principal and see if we can make it happen. In the meantime, why don't you start brainstorming some ideas for what the group could do?" The boy nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Thanks, Ms. Carter. I'll start working on it." Over the next few days, the boy threw himself into planning. He thought about what he wanted the group to achieve: raising awareness, sharing stories, maybe even organizing events. He wrote down his ideas in a notebook, his handwriting messy but his thoughts clear. He even reached out to a few classmates he thought might be interested, and to his surprise, they were eager to help. When Miss Carter called him into her classroom a week later, he felt a jolt of anticipation. "I talked to the principal," she said, her tone encouraging. "He thinks it's a great idea and wants to support it. We can start with a small meeting after school next week and see how it goes. How does that sound?" The boy's face lit up. "That sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Ms. Carter." She smiled. "Don't thank me yet, this is just the beginning. But I think you're onto something really important." The boy left the classroom feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in weeks. He couldn't wait to tell his mom about the progress he'd made. When he got home, she was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. He burst in, his excitement spilling over. "Mom, guess what? The principal said yes. We're starting a group at school to talk about fairness and equality. Miss Carter's helping, and some of my classmates want to join too." His mom put down the knife and turned to him, her face breaking into a wide smile. "That's incredible. I'm so proud of you." She pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in a long time, the boy felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As they sat down to dinner that night, the boy couldn't stop talking about his plans. His mom listened, her eyes shining with pride. She knew this was just the beginning, but she also knew her son had taken the first step toward making a real difference. And for now, that was enough. The day of the first meeting for the school group arrived, and the boy felt a mix of excitement and nerves. He had spent the past week preparing, jotting down ideas and talking to classmates who seemed interested. Ms. Carter had helped him set up a small room after school, with chairs arranged in a circle to encourage open conversation. As the final bell rang, the boy hurried to the room, his heart pounding. A few students trickled in, some curious, others genuinely interested. By the time the meeting started, there were about 10 people in the room, a small but eager group. The boy stood at the front, clutching his notebook, and took a deep breath. "Thanks for coming," he began, his voice a little shaky. "I wanted to start this group because, well, something happened to me that made me realize how important it is to talk about fairness and equality. I thought maybe we could share stories, learn from each other, and figure out how to make things better." He paused, looking around the room. A few students nodded, and one girl raised her hand. "What happened to you?" she asked gently. The boy hesitated for a moment before sharing his story. He talked about the store incident, the manager's accusation, and how his mom had stood up for him. As he spoke, he noticed the room growing quieter, the students leaning in to listen. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before another student spoke up. "That's messed up," a boy said, shaking his head. "I've had stuff like that happen to me too. It's like people just assume the worst because of how you look." Others began to share their own experiences, stories of being followed in stores, treated unfairly by teachers, or judged by strangers. The boy listened, his initial nervousness fading as he realized how much they all had in common. By the end of the meeting, the group had decided on a name, Fair Voices. They agreed to meet every week and brainstorm ways to raise awareness in the school and community. As the boy walked home that evening, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The meeting had gone better than he'd expected, and he was excited about what they could achieve together. When he got home, his mom was waiting for him, her face eager for news. "How did it go?" she asked as soon as he walked through the door. The boy smiled. "It was really good. People shared their stories, and we came up with some ideas. We're calling the group Fair Voices." His mom's eyes lit up. "That's a great name. I'm so proud of you for taking this on." Over the next few weeks, the group grew steadily. More students joined, and the meetings became a safe space for sharing and brainstorming. They decided to organize a school-wide event to raise awareness about fairness and equality, with guest speakers and workshops. The boy took on a leadership role, coordinating with Ms. Carter and his classmates to make it happen. One afternoon, as the group was planning the event, the boy had an idea. "What if we invite the store manager to come?" he suggested. "Not to confront him, but to have a conversation. Maybe it'll help him understand why this stuff matters." The room fell silent for a moment before one of the students nodded. "That's brave," she said. "But it could be really powerful." The boy wasn't sure if the manager would agree, but he decided it was worth a try. With Ms. Carter's help, he reached out to the store, explaining the event and extending the invitation. To his surprise, the manager agreed to attend. As the event date approached, the boy felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. Fair Voices was making a difference, and he was proud to be part of it. The day of the school-wide event arrived, and the atmosphere was buzzing with energy. The gymnasium had been transformed into a space for learning and conversation, with posters about fairness and equality lining the walls. Students, teachers, and even a few parents filled the room, chatting excitedly as they found their seats. The boy stood near the front, nervously adjusting his notes. This was the biggest thing he'd ever been a part of, and he wanted everything to go perfectly. Miss Carter walked over and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've done an amazing job putting this together," she said. "Just breathe and enjoy it. This is your moment." The boy nodded, taking a deep breath. He glanced at the entrance and saw the store manager walk in, looking a little out of place but willing to participate. The boy felt a flicker of nervousness but reminded himself why he'd invited the man. This wasn't about confrontation, it was about understanding. The event began with a few opening remarks from the principal, who praised the students for taking initiative and creating a space for important conversations. Then it was the boy's turn to speak. He stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly, and looked out at the crowd. "Hi, everyone," he began, his voice steadying as he spoke. "A few months ago, something happened to me that changed the way I see the world. I was accused of something I didn't do, and it made me realize how important it is to talk about fairness and equality. That's why we started Fair Voices, to share stories, learn from each other, and work toward making things better." He paused, glancing at the store manager, who was sitting near the back. "I want to thank everyone who's here today, especially those who are willing to have these tough conversations. This isn't about blaming anyone, it's about understanding and growing together." The crowd applauded, and the boy felt a surge of confidence. The rest of the event went smoothly, with guest speakers sharing their experiences and students leading workshops on topics like bias, empathy, and standing up for what's right. The store manager participated quietly, listening intently and even asking a few questions during one of the workshops. When the event ended, the boy noticed the manager lingering near the back of the room. He hesitated for a moment before walking over, his heart pounding. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice sincere. The manager looked at him, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied. "I'll be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect, but this was eye-opening. I realize now that what happened with you wasn't just an isolated incident. It's part of a bigger problem, and I need to do better." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of relief and hope. "That's all we're asking for people to listen and try to do better." The manager extended his hand, and the boy shook it, feeling a sense of closure. As he walked away, he couldn't help but smile. This was what Fair Voices was all about, creating understanding and sparking change. Later that evening, as the boy and his mom sat at the kitchen table, he recounted the day's events. His mom listened with a proud smile, her eyes shining. "You did something really special today," she said. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who was there. I'm so proud of you." The boy felt a warmth spread through him. He knew there was still a lot of work to do, but for the first time, he felt like he was making a real difference. Fair Voices was more than just a group, it was a movement, and he was proud to be at the heart of it. As he went to bed that night, the boy felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he was ready to keep fighting for what was right. And with his mom, his friends, and Fair Voices by his side, he knew anything was possible. The success of the school event gave Fair Voices a momentum that no one had expected. Students who had attended the workshops began sharing what they'd learned with their friends, and soon, the group's message started spreading beyond the school. The boy felt a growing sense of pride as he saw the impact of their work, but he also knew they couldn't stop there. There was still so much to do. At the next Fair Voices meeting, the group discussed their next steps. One student suggested creating a social media page to share stories and resources. Another proposed organizing a community cleanup day to bring people together and show that Fair Voices was about action, not just talk. The boy loved the ideas, but one suggestion stood out to him: reaching out to other schools to start their own Fair Voices chapters. "If we can do this here, why can't other schools do it too?" a girl named Jasmine asked. "We could help them get started and create a bigger network." The boy nodded, feeling excited by the idea. "That's amazing. We could even plan a big event where all the chapters come together. Like a Fair Voices summit or something." The group loved the idea, and they immediately started brainstorming how to make it happen. Ms. Carter offered to help them reach out to other schools, and within a few weeks, they had connected with students from 3 nearby schools who were eager to start their own Fair Voices groups. As the boy worked on coordinating with the other schools, he couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. There was so much to do: planning meetings, creating materials, and making sure everyone was on the same page. But every time he felt stressed, he reminded himself why he was doing this. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about creating a movement that could make a real difference. One evening, as he was working on his laptop, his mom walked into his room with a cup of tea. "You've been working so hard," she said, setting the tea down on his desk. "Don't forget to take care of yourself too." The boy smiled, grateful for her support. "I know, Mom. It's just, this feels so important. I don't want to let anyone down." His mom sat down on the edge of his bed, her expression thoughtful. "You're not going to let anyone down. You've already done more than most people ever do. Just remember, you don't have to do it all alone. That's what the group is for." Her words reminded him of something he'd been forgetting: Fair Voices wasn't just his project, it was a team effort. The next day at school, he made a point to delegate tasks and involve everyone in the planning process. The group responded with enthusiasm, and soon, the workload felt more manageable. As the weeks went by, the Fair Voices network continued to grow. The boy and his classmates worked tirelessly, organizing meetings, creating resources, and spreading their message. It wasn't always easy, but every time they faced a challenge, they reminded each other why they were doing this: to create a world where everyone was treated with fairness and respect. The boy knew they still had a long way to go, but he also knew they were on the right path. With every new school that joined, every story that was shared, and every conversation that was had, they were making a difference. And for the boy, that was all that mattered. The Fair Voices Summit was finally here. After weeks of planning, coordinating with other schools, and countless late-night meetings, the day had arrived. The boy stood at the entrance of the community center, where the event was being held, and watched as students, teachers, and even some parents filed in. The room was alive with energy, filled with posters, banners, and the buzz of excited conversations. It was hard to believe that this all started with one small idea: a group to talk about fairness and equality. The boy's mom was there too, helping to set up the refreshments table. She caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up, her smile filled with pride. He waved back, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. Without her, none of this would have been possible. The summit began with a welcome speech from the boy. He stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and felt a mix of nerves and excitement. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice steady. "Today is about coming together to share our stories, learn from each other, and work toward a future where everyone is treated with fairness and respect. This isn't just about one school or one community, it's about all of us." The crowd erupted into applause, and the boy felt a swell of pride. He introduced the first speaker, a student from another school who shared her experience of being unfairly judged because of her cultural background. Her story was powerful and moving, and it set the tone for the rest of the event. Throughout the day, there were workshops, panel discussions, and even a few performances by students who used poetry and music to express their thoughts on fairness and equality. The boy moved from room to room, listening, learning, and occasionally stepping in to help facilitate discussions. He was amazed by the passion and creativity of everyone involved. One of the most impactful moments came during a panel discussion featuring the store manager who had accused the boy months earlier. The manager spoke openly about how the incident and the Fair Voices event at the boys' school had changed his perspective. "I realized that my actions weren't just about one moment, they were part of a bigger problem," he said. "I've been working to educate myself and make changes in how I run my store. It's not easy, but it's important." The boy felt a lump in his throat as he listened. He hadn't expected the manager to be so honest, and it reminded him why they were doing this, to create understanding and spark change, even in the most unlikely places. As the summit drew to a close, the boy took the stage one last time. "Today has been incredible," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "But this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Fair Voices is about more than just talking, it's about action. Let's take what we've learned here today and use it to make a difference in our schools, our communities, and our world." The crowd rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. The boy looked out at the sea of faces, feeling a sense of hope and determination. They had started something powerful, and he knew it was only going to grow from here. As he left the stage, his mom was waiting for him, her eyes shining with tears. "I'm so proud of you," she said, pulling him into a tight hug. The boy hugged her back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "This is just the beginning, you know. You've started something amazing." The boy nodded, feeling a surge of excitement for the future. Fair Voices was more than just a group, it was a movement. And he was ready to keep leading the way. The weeks following the Fair Voices Summit were a whirlwind of activity. The event had sparked a wave of enthusiasm, and the movement was growing faster than anyone had anticipated. Schools from across the district were reaching out, asking how they could start their own Fair Voices chapters. The boy and his core team worked tirelessly, creating guides, hosting virtual training sessions, and even visiting other schools to help them get started. Despite the busy schedule, the boy made sure to take moments to reflect on how far they'd come. What had started as a personal experience of injustice had turned into something much bigger, a movement that was touching lives and inspiring change. He felt proud of what they'd accomplished, but he also knew there was still so much work to do. One evening, as he sat at his desk reviewing plans for an upcoming Fair Voices workshop, his mom knocked on his door. "You've been working non-stop," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Don't forget to take a break every now and then." The boy smiled, setting down his pen. "I know, Mom. It's just, this feels so important. I don't want to slow down now." His mom walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I get it. But remember, you're not just doing this for everyone else, you're doing it for yourself too. Take time to enjoy the journey." Her words stayed with him as he continued his work. He realized she was right. While it was important to keep pushing forward, it was also important to celebrate the wins along the way. A few days later, the boy received an unexpected email. It was from a local news station, asking if they could feature Fair Voices in a segment about youth-led initiatives making a difference in the community. The boy couldn't believe it. He immediately called a meeting with the group to share the news. "This is huge," one of the students said, her eyes wide with excitement. "We could reach so many more people with this." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "But we have to make sure we represent Fair Voices the right way. This is our chance to show everyone what we're about." The group spent the next few days preparing for the interview. They practiced talking points, chose stories to share, and even created a short video showcasing their work. When the day of the interview arrived, the boy felt a surge of adrenaline as the camera crew set up in the school library. The reporter, a friendly woman with a warm smile, started by asking the boy how Fair Voices began. He took a deep breath and shared his story, the incident at the store, the community meeting, and how it had all led to the creation of Fair Voices. He spoke about the importance of standing up for what's right and creating spaces for honest conversations. Other members of the group shared their experiences too, talking about how Fair Voices had impacted their lives and their communities. By the end of the interview, the reporter was visibly moved. "What you're doing is incredible," she said. "You're not just talking about change, you're making it happen." When the segment aired a few days later, the boy and his mom watched it together on the living room couch. Seeing himself on TV felt surreal, but what touched him most was seeing the faces of his friends and hearing their stories. It was a powerful reminder of why they were doing this. The response to the segment was overwhelming. Emails and messages poured in from people who had been inspired by their work. Some wanted to start Fair Voices chapters in their own communities, while others simply wanted to thank them for giving a voice to something so important. As the boy lay in bed that night, he thought about everything they'd accomplished. Fair Voices had started as a small idea, but it had grown into something much bigger, a movement that was changing lives. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he also knew they were ready to face them. With his mom's words echoing in his mind, he smiled to himself. This was just the beginning. Fair Voices was more than a group, it was a promise to keep fighting for fairness, equality, and a better future for everyone. And he couldn't wait to see where it would go next.